Can I ask, is this 2 minutes or 3 minutes? It says 2 minutes in front of me. Thank you, Ethics Commissioners. My name is Ellen Lee Zhao, ELLENLEEZHOU. I have been working for San Francisco as a public social worker for more than 10 years. I am a union delegate for government employees. I am also the Director of Public Relations for the California Civic Grand Jury Association, the San Francisco chapter. I am trained to practice good government practices. As a resident, I have been coming to report to you about abusive powers within the electoral officers who purposely create laws to welcome criminals and support illegal activities to raise our public dollars, such as sanctuary city and sanctuary state. We are no longer a people government. I was one of the 8 candidates to run for mayor for the June 5th, 2018 election. I went through the election process and I found many holes in the unfair and unjustified campaign process. During the campaign process, I was not allowed to join more than 20 mayor candidates' debates and forums in public places, including City Hall with televised programs and public libraries. And that is misleading the voters. I later found out many of those debates and community events supported by Super PAC, which is organized by Democrats and Democratic-related agents. I was being discriminated because I am not white, and I am not Black, and I am not Democrat. Today, I'm here to request you as Ethics Commissions to review the election process, that we are engaging the people who pay to play with unlimited money, for example, contribution from cannabis operators who are willfully violate our federal law and our constitutional rights. The United States flag, every time you start, but in here you don't start, it says, "The flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation under God, invisible, and with liberty and justice for all." For many of the declarations that we repeatedly amended, but the one 242 years ago, America, the people in America with a lot of Bill of Rights, that we are protected with constitutional rights for our safety and health. According to the Election Integrity Project, our voting system is corrupt. 120% overqualified means the people who are not qualified to vote but voted, like people who are undocumented citizens, they are not qualified, they're illegal immigrants, they are non-existing residents, dead people also voted, which means I have come and asked you for fair election and protect the public. People have the right to know how corrupted the government has been running. And you guys are in here, judges, attorneys for the city. You are not serving the United States. You are not serving the United States of America. You are serving a self-contained, a dictatorship, a tyranny government in here because you do not hear the public comments and complaints. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment on agenda items appearing or not appearing on the agenda?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Luann Bassan, B-A-S-S-A-N. I last testified here on October 19th, 2018, with regard to the abuse of power exercised by your administrative office and the executive director, and we had the opportunity to discuss the writ of mandate which had been issued by the Superior Court a few days earlier. And I'm really sorry to have to be back here again, but I recently received a communication from your executive director's office fining me $10 allegedly because I filed a form 1 day late. Allegedly, the Form 161, the Statement for Mass Mailings, was filed a day late. I hand-delivered this form and got a date-stamped copy, this form and the other form, on the same day, October 12th. Pursuant to the Ethics Commission's guidelines, I delivered this within 5 business days. I objected to their attorney, and he said he had to defer. Now, this is what happened. It took 67 days for the office to figure out that I allegedly was 1 day late. 67 days? They drafted a letter on December 18th, which was never sent to me. I never got a hard copy. Instead, it was emailed to me 6 days later on December 24th, which is Christmas Eve. I was given exactly 14 days to respond till January 7th. The problem is, counsel for the office knew I was on vacation at that time. And I think this was a deliberate and vicious attempt by the administrative office to try to make my life more of a nightmare than they've already made it. Why does it take this office 67 days to draft a letter which isn't even mailed, and then to email it on Christmas Eve? What kind of abusive power is this office exercising? You are the commission above this office. I urged you on October 19th to do an audit, to figure out what is going on behind your backs in that office. Now, I have to tell you that I was advised this afternoon when I came in by Mr. Jeff Pierce, sitting right here in front of me, whom I've never met before, that apparently this issue has come to Ms. Pelham's attention, and they realized that they forgot about the holiday. See, I was right. I was within 5 business days because holidays don't count. And they realized they forgot the holiday, and Ms. Pelham will be issuing me a waiver letter. Now, I have asked for a letter of retraction and to make sure that my name is removed from any blacklist that they try to create. So I appreciate Mr. Pierce approaching me and letting me know this, but I do not have this letter, and therefore I am bringing this to your attention. If I do get the letter promptly, I won't have to appear next month. Otherwise, I will be back. And as I said last time, I am making it my mission to dissolve this office because it is out of control and it is entirely abusive. And please take that into consideration and have an audit of this office. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes, Commissioner Collins.
Miss, what is it that you paid? $10?
They want $10, but I'm not late.
Have you paid $10?
No,
All
because
right.
I'm not late.
All right, that's all I asked.
Thank you.
Through the chair to Ms. Pelham, what is the $10 for?
We communicated incorrectly, as it turns out, with Ms. Basson about a $10 one-day late fee for a filing.
Yeah.
We did not take into account the extension because of a holiday.
All right.
We
So
were wrong.
Is the
and
$10 canceled?
The $10 will be canceled and has been canceled, and she will be receiving a letter to that effect.
All right, so there is nothing pending, and for the record, I do not believe the Ethics Commission of the City and County of San Francisco is out of control. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Thank you. Other public comment?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Avalos. I'm here to speak on the consent calendar, item number 4, in the matters of the proposed stipulate.
Well, why don't
We're still, we'll wait to get to item number
Actually,
4 on, item number 2 on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda still. So if there's no other,
When item 4 is called, then you'll be invited to speak.
thank you. Any other public comment for agenda item number 2?
Good afternoon. So my understanding is that this has to do with anything that's on the agenda or not, right?
Yes.
So I'd like to, because the amount of time we have is so short, I'd like to give some of my thoughts on the public financing proposals starting now and then more later.
Oh,
Would that be okay?
that's item 5.
That's, we'll take public comment
Well,
on
it says
the,
either items that are on the agenda. It says what it says, doesn't it?
so I would ask
Item
the,
five
yeah, no,
is
I would ask the
discussion.
deputy city attorney to clarify whether public comment can be given twice on an agenda item.
Deputy City Attorney John Gibner, the way that the Ethics Commission's bylaws are structured, which is, I think, atypical for many city commissions, the general public comment can be both items that are appearing on today's agenda or not appearing on today's agenda. So it's okay for members of the public to comment on items that are appearing on the agenda, although typically in these situations, the public comment comes with the agenda item. But Mr. Hill could speak on public financing now during general public comment and also speak on item 5 when public comment is called on that item.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Stephen Hill. I'm one of the original co-authors of the Prop O, which was passed in 2000 to set up the public financing law here in San Francisco. And I was also involved in subsequent amendments in 2005, 2006 to extend that to the mayor's race, and then also amendments in 2009 and 2012. So I have a long history with this. I also was responsible for getting 15% of the public financing money to go to staff to administer this law, because we understand that there's work involved, and I'm very sensitive to that. And I'm sensitive to the issues that the staff have raised about how much work it has become to administer this law currently. And we've proposed a number of alternative ways to fix that issue other than what staff are proposing. I believe what the staff are proposing would actually be very dangerous to this law and would undermine it. And later on, you're going to hear testimony from the city of Los Angeles where this law of lifting the spending caps is already in place, and how that has led to a huge increase in campaign spending, and that it actually, we have numbers to show that our law, even with the flaws that it has, is much more effective in that way than what they have in Los Angeles. So I don't think we want to import into San Francisco what they have in Los Angeles that is very flawed. We propose instead take a scalpel approach instead of the meat cleaver approach that is being proposed here. Instead of just completely lifting the expenditure limits when you reach a certain point, there are other ways to deal with this that we are going to propose. What the staff is proposing, they say in their report that it would not remove spending limits for participating candidates. But I ask you to think about this a little bit more deeply. They basically say the spending limits apply as long as no candidates reach the spending limits. And then once candidates reach the spending limits don't apply anymore. I mean, that kind of circuitous thinking is, you know, it applies when no one needs it, and it doesn't apply when you need it. It doesn't make any sense at all, and it's going to lead to a huge increase in the amount of money that's already spent, that's going to be spent in San Francisco elections, more than already it is. It's sort of a catch-22. I would submit to you that doing that gives you a public perception problem. We're asking the public, the taxpayers, to pay for money. We already hear, or have heard for years, welfare for politicians. You know, this money could be used for other purposes. And so we can't be able to say to them, you know, there actually is some expenditure limits. No, we're going to be able to have to say to them, no, there are no expenditure limits. We just, you know, candidates get to spend whatever they want. We just want some of it to be public money. I think that's not a smart way to go when we have other ways that we could address this. The current expenditure limits have actually been moderately effective. When you look at the data from LA, you'll see that. And also, when you even look at the staff report in their graph, what you see is that the staff graphs show that candidates are actually, the expenditure limit is being lifted several weeks, and in the mayor's race, looks like to be about a month later in the current system than what it would be under the staff proposal. And their view is like, well, that's not that much to make a difference. Well, you know, in a campaign, 3 weeks, a month is a lifetime. So I think that
Time.
yeah. So I think that, you know, really, are these expenditure limits working as well as we would like? No, in the age of Citizens United, it's pretty hard, but they are working to some degree. Thank you. I'll have more to say later.
I have a question for you, Mr. Givner, as the Deputy City Attorney. So thank you for clarifying earlier about the ability to give public comment more than once. How does that apply to the consent calendar? Because I don't want to be unfair to Mr. Avalos, who was wanting to comment on agenda item number 4 during the call for comment on agenda item number 2.
Same rule applies. So former Supervisor Avalos can speak during general public comment, even on the matter that's on the consent calendar, or can wait until
Okay,
the consent
great.
calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Avalos. I would like to invite you up to the podium if you'd like to give public comment per agenda item number 2.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. It's not very easy to come before you at this moment to talk about what I'm going to be talking about, but I had come to say that I accept the settlement that I have made with the Ethics Commission. This has been going on for quite a number of years. I ran for mayor in 2011 and acknowledged that there were very serious shortcomings in my Treasury's ability to keep records. While we had no misspending of any kind, we actually delivered $48,000 back to the Ethics Commission because we didn't spend all the money we got from public financing. We wanted to make sure that we were frugal in our effort, and part of that was having a treasury made up of volunteers who were not professional enough to actually keep track of our paperwork. And so that's what this settlement is about, is to account for that. I accept full responsibility for my campaign and its shortcomings, and I'm prepared to deal with the consequences of that. I feel like the consequences have actually gone on for a number of years, especially the work that we've done with the commission to recover records that we could find, and also the time and effort that the Ethics Commission staff had gone through in going through our campaign took a lot of time and effort. And so I'm prepared to deal with that. Lastly, I would like to say that this has had a tremendous amount of toil on my life, and I'm really eager to get it behind me, and look forward to that starting tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not clear, Mr. Avalos. Did you speak to object to this proposed stipulation?
No, I did not.
All right.
I did not. Quite the contrary.
Okay, thank you. Other public comment?
Hi, I'm Larry Bush. I'm making a comment about item number 5, even though I'll come back to item number 5 because it's got so much in it that it's difficult to use the time fully for what I want to say. One of the items on item 5 is amendment 2, which has to do with penalties for ineligibility to participate in the program. And I have objections to 2 aspects of that. One is that the trigger for being ineligible is that you have failed to disclose appropriately the money that you spent or the money that you took in. So it's essentially you are ineligible to participate if there was $10,000 or more that was not reported in your campaign. There is no penalty, however, for spending the money illegally. So let's say you have someone who spends public funding to put signs in city buses, which is a violation of our law, but not an ethics law, or puts up signs on poles, which is a violation at DPW. So those things do not fall within the jurisdiction of ethics, and they are not addressed at all in this proposal. You get scot-free, you can go ahead and spend public money for things that are illegal, and if ethics isn't going to enforce it, and the other people don't enforce it, it has no consequences on future participation in public financing. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that the penalty is based on even unintentional violations. And considering, as Mr. Avalos just said, many low-budget campaigns rely on volunteer treasurers, this is a disincentive for community participation in campaigns. In effect, you'll have to end up hiring a professional treasurer to make sure that all the work is done properly. And as we saw in the mayor's race, even when they hired professional consultants, things were not always done appropriately. So I think that when you look at that issue, you should put it over and add to the issues of spending that is in violation of city's ordinances, and that it has to be an intentional violation, not an unintentional violation. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comment? Public comment on agenda item number 2? Okay, so we'll move on to the Items in the consent calendar. Item 3 is the draft minutes for the Ethics Commission's December 21, 2018 regular meeting. And item number 4, the proposed stipulation, decision, and order in the matter of John Avalos, Ethics Commission complaint number 13-150618. Are there any members of the commission?
I'm sorry, correction. Since you put my name in the front about the draft minutes from last week, you put it down in here that I said I was not allowed to participate in all debates. That was not true. I said many debates.
Excuse me, I have not yet called for public comment. I'll invite you up in a moment. Thank you.
I just have one suggestion, and that is on page 4 under public comment by Mr. Marsteller. I think the word acted should be inserted after department. So to read, he was pleased to see the planning department acted on the issue.
Okay.
I'll move
that-
approval as amended.
There's a second. All in favor? Or,
Aye.
oh, I'm sorry, public comment. Ms. Zhao, did you have public comment on the minutes?
I apologize that I came in here, that I didn't hear it well. I want you correct the record, because I did not say all debates. I said more than 20 debates and forums. That means many I was not allowed. Not all, but many. The minutes in here, number 2, public comments. Ellen Lee Zhao stated that she had spoke before the Ethics Commission many times to state that her concern about governmental corruption and is asking commissions to review the election process, particularly with regard to career politicians. As a former candidate for mayor, she stated she's not allowed to participate in all debate. The word all itself is a problem, okay? I did not say all debates. I said many debates. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
If you're looking at me,
I'll move
I
to, move to.
conclude it is accurate. The number of debates is not specified, and it states accurately that she said she didn't participate in all of them. Again, I move approval.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are approved. Okay, agenda item number 4. Are there any commissioners who wish to discuss this separately? To discuss this? All right, public comment? Public comment, okay.
No,
Motion to, I'd make a motion to approve.
move to approve.
The second, all in favor? Aye. The item is approved unanimously. Agenda item number 5 is discussion and possible action on draft ordinances regarding the public financing program. Commissioner Ambrose?
I see there are a lot of people here to testify, and I'm very interested in being educated on these issues, but I also know that Commissioner Lee had asked last time that we continue this item for action because she wanted to vote on it. And since she's sick, is it possible that we can take the testimony, have time to think about it? I'm sure she could watch the testimony on SFG TV and wait to vote at the next meeting in February. If that would be acceptable, that would be something I would propose.
Is that a motion?
A motion?
Yes. I would second that. I'd welcome the public comment today, but then we will actually vote on it at the following meeting next month. Commissioner Collins?
Well, my comment is I don't want to do something twice. And I can see the logic in taking public comment today and moving it to continue. because I note a number of people who have communicated with others and me on the subject, which suggests that if public comment is taken today, public comment at the February meeting be limited to information and statements which were not made today, to the extent humanly possible.
Ask the city attorney if we could put those conditions on public comment at the next meeting on this agenda item?
You can't put that condition formally on public comment. If the agenda item is on the agenda, any member of the public can come and speak on it. You can definitely ask at next week's meeting to encourage people to focus on new comments, but you cannot limit the content of their comments.
All right, I'll second the motion, so encouraging people, assuming the motion's adopted.
Is that your motion that you're seconding? I don't know what the motion is.
I think the motion was to take public comment today on agenda item number 5, but to hold over defer action on it until the February meeting, such time when Commissioner Lee can join us, and that I believe Commissioner Kopp would like to offer a friendly amendment to that motion that would encourage those providing public comment on the agenda item to limit it to new commentary.
Mm-hmm.
Does that capture?
Yes.
Okay. So that is the motion, and I believe there was a second from Commissioner Rennie?
No, I didn't.
No? Oh, okay. Not for that one.
I guess the difficulty I have, and I probably won't be here at that meeting, is that this is a very important issue. And if we leave it open to February, which is fine, I don't have any opposition to that. But if we leave it open to February, I think that we should take whatever public comment there is without restrictions on people responding to it, whether they responded and made the same comment in January. That's all. It may extend it a little bit, but it's an important enough issue to have the public fully involved.
So the motion stands. It was not seconded. So is there a second for the motion to take public comment today, take action in February, but to encourage those who provide public comment to limit themselves to things that are new or had not been raised before? I heard from Commissioner Rennie.
Remember, you may have a new commissioner
This is true.
at that point who won't have heard those comments. So any limitation on it seems to me is unfair to him or her, as the case may be.
I think, to be clear, the city attorney told us that, and make sure everybody who's here hears this, I think they understand that there is no restriction. They can come and give exactly the same testimony verbatim. I think what Commissioner Kopp is saying, don't do it on our behalf since we will have heard you and have taken it to heart. So I don't think it really has any effect. I am concerned about the prospect that you won't be here. I guess I'm assuming that since you're still here now, no one's been nominated, you have the right to hold over, that the DA will just keep you around for another 60 days. So, but I still think that we shouldn't vote on it today, given Commissioner Lee's explicit request. So can we
Are you finished? Madam Chairwoman, Commissioner Rennie reminds us that you want to have a new commissioner hear testimony, and therefore it's not practical, in my opinion, to try to adopt a rule against repeating oneself. I think I will withdraw that idea, and I will support the motion to take testimony today and to continue, and I'll make such a motion, continue it to the February meeting.
I'll second.
Yeah, they're astute enough to know they don't want to waste the public's time, too. Thanks.
Okay, so we have the motion
I second it.
with the second from Commissioner Rennie. All in favor?
Do we need
Do
public
we-
comment?
Oh, sorry, we need,
Now you
need
need
public,
public.
we do need to have public, okay. Have public comment on,
Item 5.
on item 5, yes. Okay.
This is public comment on the vote to hear today, but have the actual vote in
Oh,
February.
it's
Is that
public
right?
comment on
The
all of
actual-
agenda item 5,
Not just the motion,
not just the motion.
the whole
The whole-
agenda.
In that case, here are the points that I would like to make to you tonight.
Okay.
One is that please include in the packet in February all the written comments that have been submitted to you, because what you have in your packet today only includes one written comment. I understand that there is a question of how timely some things were submitted, but you'll have plenty of time to submit, to put things into the February packet. I had myself asked for my submission to be included at the desk, and I had sent it to each member of the commission. It's not at the desk, and as far as I know, there is no way the public knows that I submitted comments on the public financing thing. That's number one. Number two is that when you turn it over to February, you also allow for further amendments as it proceeds, which would be the normal course of business. I took a look, and what I think is the most important thing is that the purpose of the Public Financing Act is to ensure greater participation by candidates and by a greater sense of trust by the public. And if you take a look at how money is flowing into our campaigns, I looked, for example, at independent expenditure committees and campaign committees of candidates. And independent expenditure committees aimed at a specific candidate outmatched what was being available by public dollars by a considerable amount of money. That's in the documents that I submit to each of you. The point being that playing around with how the public dollars are allocated without addressing the fact that there's independent expenditure money aimed at a candidate and coming from people who have business before that candidate has not been addressed. Yet, if you read the law itself that was passed, it specifically says that the purpose of the law is also to address independent expenditure committees for or against candidates. And in talking to other jurisdictions, it is apparent that you can do that if the independent expenditure committee is aimed at a specific candidate and if the contributions are coming from people who have business before that candidate. And I've got that from the Campaign Legal Center, as well as from Common Cause and other groups. So I would urge that you take a look at that, because that will have a significant impact on how much is needed to match it from public dollars. I recommend that you read the memo I sent. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ellen Lee Zhao. I am a public employee, and I'm here today to represent myself, not the government. I've said it over and over right here. If I am a government agent from the federal, many of us will not have a job in here. And I have been living in San Francisco for the last 33 years. I see people come and go, electoral offices. I help people campaign before. And I realized that how bad our campaign finance itself is a problem. I see this letter that this person is talking about LA, Los Angeles, how good it is. Here's what happened. According to the Integrity Election Project, LA and California alone remove 1.5 voters because they are dead people. They don't exist. They are illegal. They are not qualified. 1.5 million voters being removed from San Francisco voter system. If we are learning something from the corrupted systems like Los Angeles, like Oakland, like San Francisco itself, we learn the system, that we are a deep state. We are a system operated by people who are having money and supported the super PAC. Last month, when I was here, you, the reporters in here, the people represent ethics department, give a report. The report says alone, 2018 alone, the public money was matching 4.16 million public dollars. As a citizen, as a public government employee, as a mom, we had no future in San Francisco because of all this corrupted behavior. The super PAC was created by people who are super corrupt for the city. We have no end, no future for our society because we are no longer a people government. You discuss what the people want behind you, and you implement the laws to interest, support the illegal stuff and corrupted stuff. I am here to urge you, we should have limited public money. In the old times, when people campaign, they go out to the community to meet with people, talk with residents, how we can be improving, clean the city, remove the drug dealers from the street, clean the streets, help the homeless, heal people, give people life, use the money effectively for sanctuary city and sanctuary state. California State, 2017, spent $27 billion on illegals. Those money that we can use for publics. You invented the real, repeatedly corrupted and not helping the people. So please, limit it on finance. You could make it no matching to save our public dollars and use the money for after-school program and help the homeless. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, President Chu and Commissioners. My name is John Gollinger, and I'm a longtime campaign finance reform advocate with public interest groups and as a concerned citizen. And I've also run a number of campaigns in San Francisco under the public financing system, which I think gives me a bit of a unique blend of experiences. I ran a supervisor campaign in District 3 in 2008, and I ran a mayor's race, Jane Kim's mayor's race, last year. So I have the vantage point of both an advocate who cares about the issues and someone who's had to live within the rules. I want to speak, and you have my letter in the packet. It's short and sweet. I'll try to keep my comments the same. I certainly concur with the staff's objective, and I really am speaking specifically to the proposal to eliminate the spending limits in the event that any candidate exceeds them, or the candidate's IE exceeds them. I certainly agree with the two objectives on page 5 and 6 of the memo. The staff says, number one, it wants to simplify the system, that it adds an unnecessary burden to the participating candidates, and I think also to the staff. And then the second objective in there is, the argument is that it doesn't do much, that it has no benefit. Let me take the last one. Both are wrong. This proposal does neither. The second is simply the facts don't bear it out. The argument, I think, is that, and there's charts, I think, in an attempt to back this up, the argument is that because candidates already go over the spending limit, why do we need a spending limit when candidates are already going over it? And the staff is not proposing eliminating it entirely. I understand that. But the effect will be the same. Certainly in last year's mayor's race, in all the competitive supervisor races we just had, likely the races that are competitive this fall, under this proposal, there would be no spending limit once the races got underway. And that could be because of independent spending candidates. It could be very likely because of IEs that can do as they wish. But as the Los Angeles experience shows, and someone will speak to that, there, where they have the system being proposed, the leading candidate for mayor spent 136% above the spending limit, whereas London Breed, under our system, spent 56% above the spending limit. So agreed that the current system doesn't restrict spending entirely, but it does have effect. And more to my experience, and I met with the executive director and Mr. Ford last week and tried to communicate this, I run these campaigns. I've been in the room on day one when campaigns are shaping how they're going to spend their money. And knowing that limit is in effect and not simply window dressing, that's almost certainly going to disappear, as this new proposal will make it, has a huge effect on who we talk to, on how we raise money, rather than simply raise as much from as many big donors as possible. The current system encourages candidates to raise it in smaller amounts. I want to speak to the alternative. I'm going to run out of time, but it's in my letter. I do want to encourage...
Move an additional minute.
Thank you, Commissioner Kopp. I want to propose an alternative. I'm not simply here to beat up the staff proposal. I'm not arguing the system as is one that we should retain. But rather than simply do away with spending limits, this would also dramatically streamline the program for staff and candidates. As my letter states, change two things within the current system about the lifting of the limits. Number one, change the increment. Right now in a supervisor race, it's $10,000. Make it a much bigger amount. I would argue $50,000, but you could pick something in the middle. That would reduce certainly in half and maybe more the number of times that the IEC would be raised. It would also boost candidates who live within the limits. And second, and in tandem, rather than require that entire amount be raised, simply say the moment 1 penny over the limit is raised by one candidate, the other candidates get to lift their limit. So that way you encourage candidates who are playing by the rules to play by the rules. You dramatically limit the number of times the spending limit goes up, and you simplify the system because we can explain it even better than I just did. But I want to encourage that proposal to come before you next month so that you have some choices. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners and Chair Chu. I'm Catherine Ashworth.
Can you speak closer?
May not hear me.
to the
Sorry, I
microphone?
can't tell what's.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, yeah, that is different. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Ashworth, ASHWORTH, San Francisco resident, and I'm Deputy Director of the California Clean Money Campaign. My boss is Trent Lang, Director of California Clean Money Campaign, submitted a letter to you from residing in Los Angeles. He speaks to the matching fund system in LA. So some of what I say hopefully will be familiar to you. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working on the problem of money in politics in California since 2002, with more than 150,000 supporters who really care deeply about improving California's campaign finance system. Over the years, we have worked with Los Angeles to improve their matching fund system. Haven't engaged much with San Francisco's system during that time. However, the proposed changes right now are so troubling, we feel we need to weigh in, which is why I'm here. Los Angeles's matching fund system has several rules we would actually encourage San Francisco to look at as part of a comprehensive package, like the new 6-to-1 matching rate and the fact that only small donors who are residents of the city are actually matched. However, we strongly believe it would be a grave mistake to emulate some of the worst parts of the Los Angeles system, and there are a few. For instance, the fact that expenditure ceilings are lifted completely at the first sign of significant independent expenditure, and also that it uses expenditures rather than contributions as a trigger for lifting the ceiling. As John Gollinger was just mentioning, we submitted to you in a letter of analysis of how it's working in LA, with the limits that they use. So you can see that when San Francisco's current method of raising the mayoral expenditure ceiling in increments of $100,000 limited the greatest spending mayoral candidate last cycle, London Breed, to only a 53% increase, whereas in LA, the largest spending candidate, Eric Garcetti, ended up spending 137% more because the spending cap is completely lifted in Los Angeles. So both Stephen Hill and John Gollinger have made proposals that address the concerns of staff and candidates, specifically changing the increment size to be larger, having to do it so often. We strongly support those. We'd be happy to work with the Commission and San Francisco Campaign Finance Reform community and advocates to craft a comprehensive set of amendments to make San Francisco's system combine what works in LA, what's already working here, what's working well in other places, which the proposal would probably have to gain broad enough support to be able to pass with enough supervisors. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm thinking that you should know what's on the table, and that is the California Clean Money document and Mr. Stephen Hill's proposals, all comprehensively done and presented, but not at the table is Mr. Bush or Mr. Gollinger. I assume Mr. Gollinger submitted something in writing. It's in the packet. Great. And that is in Agenda Item 5, which is a very, very thick packet. So if anybody on the floor wants to know what's on the table, that's what's on the table. And I would view this as really kind of an interested persons session we're having today. And we could add a little talk therapy or group therapy if you want, but I think otherwise we'll work well together.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Before we leave, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Stephen Hill. So in terms of the staff report that we have, which was, there's a lot of information there. So I just want to point out a couple of the problems with that report. So for example, they report that roughly 80% of public finance candidates in 2018, that the spending limit has basically made no difference because they never, they didn't have to be lifted for them. Well, that's because 80% of candidates don't have that much money. They have some public financing, but they don't have that much, so they never reach the spending cap. You don't want to gear the public financing program around the poorest candidates. They're not the problem. It's the candidates with big money. Those are the ones you want to figure out how to put the rules around so that they don't just have a spending cap that goes to infinity. And so there's a number of, we already mentioned about the graphs, how, I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I look at those graphs and I say, our spending limits are working because it means candidates there's a few weeks to a month before the caps are lifted compared to if you were to implement the policy that the staff had put before you. And, a few weeks in a campaign is a lifetime. It could make a huge difference in terms of what actually happens in that campaign, the dynamics between the candidates. So the other second proposed change is total support. Instead of gearing it to candidate expenditures, but do it by expenditures rather than contributions. And the problem with that is it would lead to candidates hiding their contributions. Because if they can hide their contributions, it means the other candidates' spending caps don't get lifted as quickly. It also would lead to less transparency around reporting contributions. Right now, they got to report their contributions all the time. If you don't have anything in there about reporting contributions in a publicly financed system, it defers to county and state law, where you only have to report 30 days out and 10 weeks out. And how many times have we seen in campaigns where suddenly after the election we find out, oh, that candidate had a lot more money to spend than anyone realized? Do we want that in a publicly financed system where we're asking the public to give their tax dollars to candidates and politicians? I don't think we do. So we've already heard one of the proposals that we put forward, instead of doing it, the staff proposal of unlimited, lifting the expenditures to infinity. Instead of doing it by 10,000, we do it by 50,000. The staff report said that they lifted the limits 165 times over 2 election cycles with 7 competitive races. If you were to increase that from 10,000 to 50,000, it would cut that into a fifth. So you basically would be looking at staff lifting the expenditure limits 30 to 35 times over 2 election cycles. It doesn't seem like that's that much in order to preserve some sense of spending caps which actually are working. We also would like to see more money. The other thing that we could make it so that staff isn't lifting as much is let's increase the spending cap a little bit. It hasn't changed in years. And because of inflation and all sorts of other things, we should lift that spending cap, and that way they won't be lifting those spending caps so soon into the election. We also should provide more public money. We should increase the match. It's at 2 to 1 now. Other cities now have gone to 6 to 1. New York City is at 8 to 1. We could lift ours so that candidates have enough money to run good campaigns. We have a number of proposals that we think meet the goals that the staff are trying to do, which we agree with. But we ask the staff to work with us more closely. And let's go together with one proposal that has broad support, because right now the staff report does not have any support from campaign finance advocates, and we need 8 votes at the Board of Supervisors to pass this. I think if we're not going together to the board together with a common proposal, I think we'll have a really hard time getting eight votes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Esther Marks, and I definitely don't know as much as the other people who have spoken before me, but I will say, first of all, as a treasurer, in 2016, for the first time, I was the treasurer for a public finance campaign, and Eric Willits was our auditor assigned, and it was great working with him. He made it very clear what was expected of me in order for the candidate to qualify for public financing and for matching funds. 2018, I was assigned another auditor, and I'm unhappy to report that it was just a nightmare. And so I am glad to see that one of the priorities of the department is to update and improve the information provided treasurers and candidates to participate in the program. I do agree with the other speakers that an expenditure limit should not be removed. I also agree that the definition of supportive funds should not be expenditures but remain contributions. Now, with the trust account issue, and I haven't talked with anyone, so I'm not clear, but it does seem that the contingency account may not be necessary, since the important part is reporting of the contributions received. So I personally am open to just having all funds go into the trust account rather than a contingency account. Also, as a last word, I haven't read the report of June 14th, but January 14th, but I'm looking just at the October 15th report. But it is just absurd that any candidate or office holder should be penalized for prior violations but not being able to participate in the public finance program. I think it's totally personal, the basis of the supervisor proposing that as consideration, and I just think that that's absurd. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Okay, there being none. Commissioner Rennie.
Yeah, I wonder if I could, go ahead. Are you, if I could ask the staff to respond, why we set a cap, initial cap. Whether or not that should be raised, I think, is a fair question. But what's the purpose of setting the cap in the first place? Why do you do it?
Well, I think the initial cap exists for at least 2 reasons. One is to try to fulfill the purpose stated in the purpose and intent section of CFRO, to limit spending in campaigns. So that's kind of a general purpose. But I think a more realistic purpose for it is that it prevents candidates from using the public financing program as a source of free money, meaning a candidate that already has plenty of resources to run a campaign, just using it to get extra money, right? Because the way that you qualify for public financing under our system is by demonstrating a certain minimum threshold of fundraising. So if a candidate did not have to submit to any kind of spending limit, why wouldn't a candidate who is already fully resourced just sign up and get the money, even though they don't need it? That's why the spending limit exists there. It's to try to.
How does the initial cap relate to whether or not that candidate has a bunch of funds and another candidate doesn't? It doesn't, does it?
Do you mean the amount where it starts?
Yeah.
Oh, it's universal for all candidates. It's established
right.
in the code. Yeah.
Okay, but I'm saying that assuming that that's the purpose, and what's wrong with what's being suggested by Mr. Hill and Mr. Gollinger and others, the idea that make it a large jump to the next spending cap, but at least keep that cap there, which you initially put on in the hopes that it would limit the amount of funds being raised, right?
Right. Well, the reason why I'm not proposing that to you, recommending that approach to you, is that if you look empirically at the data, for all the candidates that we looked at in 2018, we looked at 2016 as well, but we confined the report to the 2018 candidates. It really does not appear that the incrementally adjusted spending limits are asserting any kind of limit on candidate spending. You just can't see it. That's what we try to base our reports on, is empirical evidence. I think that at a theoretical level, I can understand why it would seem like maintaining.
But if that's true, why put any in? Why have it in the first place?
Because you don't know when you enter the race if and when the limit will be removed. I agree that in most races, eventually the limits would be lifted. I think that's true, because if you look at pretty much all candidates eventually have their limits incrementally adjusted under the current approach, which means that under the staff proposal, eventually for those candidates, their limits would be lifted. However, candidates don't know when that would happen. So for example, London Breed's first adjustment didn't happen until May 15th. That's not very much time before the election. That means that she was not allowed to spend anything above the limit, $1,475,000, until after May 15th. That still is a pretty serious limitation. Even though eventually her limit was raised to considerably higher than that, it was not until May 15th. So a candidate, let's just say that a candidate had $5 million, was able to raise $5 million. That candidate would probably not try to use the public financing system to just cash in on an extra $950,000, right? Because they would say, well, I already have $5 million. I can run a very competitive campaign. I can spend the money whenever I want. Why am I going to subject myself to a $1,475,000 spending limit? And I don't know when I'm going to be released from it. I might not be released from it until 3 weeks before the election. That means I can't spend the vast majority of my money until 3 weeks before the election. No, I would rather run the campaign how I want. So that's the idea, is that it's going to discourage candidates who already have plenty of money from just taking advantage of the public financing program. And that the fixed initial spending limit right now can already do that. There's no evidence that the subsequent incrementally adjusted limits are having that effect at all.
May I?
The difficulty I'm having is figuring out if in fact you say the spending limit doesn't do anything, why put it in at all? And if it does something by putting it initially, why take it out immediately?
Well, I think the spending limit absolutely does do something. The spending limit as a general concept must remain in the program, and the staff proposal does not advocate removing spending
Well, but
limits.
it's not staying in the program because, particularly at the number it's at now, it's going to be exceeded immediately and the cap's off.
I don't think immediately, no. Like, for example, for London Breed, her spending limit would not have been removed until May 15th. She had already at that point been subjected to it for months. And I don't think that should be discounted. I think that's being kind of forgotten in a lot of the discussion, that actually for quite a long time she was subject to it. You can see the same thing for candidates Mandelman and Sheehy, that for quite a long time they were subject to the initial spending limit and they could not exceed it, and that would be the same under staff proposal. And I think that's really where the heart of the spending limit is. What the point that I tried to make in the report is that there's a lot of value in that initial spending limit. There's not a lot of value in it after it becomes incrementally adjusted, so much so that it's not justified. The complexity and burden that it imposes on candidates isn't justified.
I
Commissioner
think
Ambrose.
that is, though, the point that we're hearing in the testimony, and and it is useful to have people who've worked on campaigns. The argument that you're making that there is, it influences the way that they structure their campaign spending plan at the outset because they don't know when they might have a permission to raise and spend more. But that time factor that you're referencing as having an effect on reducing expenditure is the same point that they're making, that ultimately, collectively limits the amount expended overall. And so I guess I maybe need to go back and understand the math a little bit better in the charts. It does, require us to contemplate whether or not having just a one instant, no limit versus drawing out the time within which people will not know whether or not they're going to have a free ride will collectively reduce the amount of money in campaigns. I mean, I think that's the issue that they're bringing to us, and that we need to, those of us who've never run a campaign before, need to understand better. And I hear what you're saying, that at the end of the day, it's not really, it's not making a difference. We're just constantly raising it, especially when our limits were $10,000. It was just like I don't know about anybody else, but I was getting an email every third day, raise the limit, and it just would seem to be completely inefficient and kind of just make us look ridiculous. So I'm all for changing it, but I do want to, I think that some of the points that they're making about the time value of constraining. And then I have a question. I really don't think I fully understand the difference between basing it on contributions versus expenditures. The comment that if we don't base it on expenditures, that people will no longer have to disclose their contributions, is that true?
Right.
Okay.
So the issue about disclosure, I think, is fair, and actually, Deputy City Attorney Shen and I worked on an amendment that I would have proposed, and I'm still going to propose next month, which is to change a little bit Section 1.152 to clarify that when the candidates file their threshold statements or threshold reports, they need to continue to disclose both contributions and expenditures as they currently do. We had a discussion recently that we thought that language should be strengthened to make sure that both contributions and expenditures are disclosed so that that's not lost.
Okay. All right, thank you.
But why change it from putting it on contributions rather than expenditures if they have to disclose both?
Right. The reason for that is that a few times during the elections in 2018, there were instances where one candidate's spending limit would be increased. And when that happened, let's say that candidate had an extra $50,000 in the bank that was in excess of their spending limit that they weren't allowed to spend at that time. When that spending limit gets raised, suddenly they're allowed to spend that money. And now, since they're allowed to spend it under this formula that we use to increase the spending limits, we now have to count those funds. Whereas previously, when they were in excess of the spending limit, we don't count them. We only count contributions up to the amount of that candidate's current spending limit, because you could say that money's not yet in the race, right? The candidate's not allowed to spend the money, so we don't count it. Otherwise, you can imagine what would happen if we did count all of their contributions. The candidate would fundraise, let's say, $1 million. We'd have to count it all, even though the candidate's only allowed to spend $250,000. That's why this limit exists. When you count candidate contributions only up to the spending limit. But then what does that mean? When their spending limit goes up, you then have to count that extra chunk of contributions. That makes it seem like the candidate now has more money. That can then automatically increase the spending limit of another candidate. That happened a few times during the election. That caused a lot of concern and confusion. You could say that eventually that candidate's going to probably spend the money anyway, and so the spending limit would go up later. But there was a lot of concern that, well, the candidate whose spending limit just went up should at least get the ability to decide whether or not she wants to spend the money, and in so doing, raise that opponent's spending limit. So it's to prevent this automatic kind of ping pong effect where one raise or lift to a spending limit would cause another one. If you base on expenditures, the candidate would actually have to spend that extra money in order for the opponent's spending limit to go up. That's the reason why.
And because not all funds raised are actually spent.
Exactly.
No, but the influence is still there. I mean, if they've raised the money, it's in their campaign war chest, and you're saying we're not counting that in the first instance? We don't know what that number is until the spending limit is raised? They don't have to report contributions?
No, under the current approach, we do know how much they have. When they file their threshold reports, they have to report, if it's a supervisorial candidate, every $10,000 that they raise or spend, they have to file.
Regardless of what the spending limit is. So we would know if somebody had an extra $1 million in the bank even and was just waiting for the spending limit.
That's right. That's right.
And
But
if we count based on expenditures, you're saying with your amendment, we will still know that they had that money in their bank account.
That's correct.
Okay. And I might have to read your report 3-4 times before I really understand that inside strategy thing and why. I'm not really sure I understand why it changes the game by counting expenditures. I have to think about the math.
Sure.
What about taking the greater of expenditures or?
Right. So that's another approach.
Funds.
Some jurisdictions will count contributions or expenditures, whichever is greater. That's kind of a third way to do it. You can do expenditures, you can do contributions, or you can do whichever one is greater. It wouldn't solve the issue that was identified, because if the candidate has more contributions than they're allowed to spend, contributions are going to be higher. So you'd be counting the contributions. So that same thing would happen where when their spending limit goes up, well, their contributions are greater than their expenditures. So we're going to count contributions, and it was just freed up because their spending limit was increased. So the same thing would happen where it'll trigger the automatic increases.
Any other questions? No. Okay.
Let me ask you this. Did we vote on the motion to
No, we have.
a motion
not yet.
pending?
Yes.
And I've already spoken on the motion that's pending, but I assume.
No, previously the commission said they were accepting public comment on the committee.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought we were going to then discuss agenda item number 5.
That is what we're
No,
talking-
the public comment was for agenda item number 5.
Okay.
Did you not give your comments?
Well, I just was going to say something very brief, and I thought that if that violates the rules, then I'll make them next meeting.
Well, if I ask you what your comment, what your comment is, I can.
Well, I was
ask-
going to synthesize an idea for what the current discussion is on the floor about, and ask a question, if there was such a thing as a
Okay,
hybrid.
I can't ask you, I can't allow you to ask a question, but I can give you a chance to tell us what the idea is on the.
Well, let me just ask a simple question. Is there a jurisdiction that offers a hybrid limit, say, of 10,000 on the first go-round, and then they raise the cap to 50? Do you happen to know if there's a dual or hybrid system anywhere in
Anybody?
the United States?
Everybody's shaking their head out here, so.
Not a hybrid. Well, that might actually give you your incentive system to suppress or incentivize lower spending, while you then don't let the public or the press forget the fact that the limit has been exceeded when you notify them through press release or whatever every $50,000, so that we do keep the eye on the ball and the campaigns know what's going on. Otherwise, we may lose sight of the importance of this concept that we are supposed to be capping or disincentivizing excessive spending in an election.
Thank you. All right. So we have a pending motion to take this up again in the February meeting when Commissioner Lee is able to join us, and that we would then take action at that time. And it was seconded, so all in favor?
Aye.
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 Against? The motion is carried unanimously.
Before we leave the item, Madam Chairwoman, through the chair to the staff, I would like, by the next meeting, information about the number of cities charter cities with public financing in California which use the expenditures as the measurement, that use the contributions as we do as the measurement, and use a combination as the measurement.
Commissioner Rainey?
I also ask, if it'd be appropriate, that what gets presented to the commission on February are alternate concerning the items that are sort of in controversy between Mr. Hill, Mr. Gollinger, and the critics of the staff's approach, so that we have something concrete to consider as alternate proposals.
Okay. And I'd like to add on to what Commissioner Kopp requested. Mr. Ford, if you could include information on those cities that use a stair-step method where the limit is raised incrementally, and where I believe you have it in your essay, but having it in a chart would be very helpful, where the cap is just lifted when the criteria are met. Thank you. All right, moving right along now. Agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action on monthly staff policy report, including review, excuse me, and possible action on quarterly policy prioritization plan.
Thank you, Chair Chu. I won't run through the report. I think it's pretty brief and straightforward, but if you have any questions on it, I'd be more than glad to answer those.
Any questions for Mr. Ford?
I have a question on the pending ordinances in San Francisco. Anything more up to date than is set forth on page 3?
No, I don't believe there are any more updates.
Well, I'd like to congratulate staff on the whistleblower protection. It goes into effect on the 20th, is that right? Of January?
Oh, yeah, it's already in effect.
It's already in effect, okay, wonderful. That's a long.
Oh, two days.
Oh, 2 days, like I thought it was January 20th. So I noted in your report that the commission approved it on last year, I think almost to the day. So a long time coming, but it's great to get that, have that be in effect. So public comment on agenda item number 6.
I hope that you have Larry Bush speaking. I hope you have an opportunity to revisit the whistleblower ordinance as passed and how it's working, because what was passed was not what this commission voted for, and what was changed does not meet most of the issues that have been raised by city employees. For example, we had an extensive hearing at the Board of Supervisors about what's going on at DHR, the failure to act on retaliation and discrimination, all of which fall under the Whistleblower Act, but which were not considered here. So you might take another look at what those things are. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
I have a question,
Commissioner Kopp.
Madam Chairwoman. That pending Senate Bill 71, does the staff have an opinion as to whether the commission should act to recommend to the Board of Supervisors and Mayor support of that bill?
No opinion at this time, no.
Could you have such a recommendation by next month?
I could, yes.
I've requested.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Agenda item number 7, discussion of monthly staff enforcement report, including an update on various programmatic and operational highlights of the enforcement program's activities since the last monthly meeting.
Thank you, Chair Chu and Commissioners. This report reflects a few changes in light of a request that Commissioner Kopp made at the last meeting. So you'll see that in the introduction here, we've included some additional statistics that provide context to the numbers that the Enforcement Division currently has. So we have now 92 matters in preliminary review and 88 under investigation. And I'll remind commissioners that that is with a staff of 4. That would be me and 3 investigators. You'll see if you compare those statistics to the prior month and this month in the prior year, we do have now fewer matters in preliminary review than we had a month ago. And I think what accounts for that in part is that the executive director and I are finally catching up with the diligence of the investigators. Their ability to review matters exceeds our ability to review their work. So we have fewer matters in preliminary review this month than we had a month ago, but you'll note that we have substantially more than we had this time a year ago, although the average age, the average amount of time that it takes for staff to get through that preliminary review is more or less holding. It is slightly above where we were a year ago at just over 6 months.
Mr. Pierce, I have a question about that, and I think that you and the team are working very diligently to reduce the backlog of old cases. And I note that the number is fluctuating, so it is 5.5, like around the 6-month time frame. What are the factors that go into the time it takes in order to get through that preliminary review?
To get through an individual preliminary review?
Yeah, so like, what are the things, like, what is causing it to take the 6 months, roughly, to complete the preliminary review? And, what are some of the things that you can do in order to reduce that time?
Yeah, so I think the first answer to that question, and there may be several, would be that it does not take 6 months for staff to conduct a preliminary review. It might take an hour. It might take a week. But the time frame that is reflected here includes the amount of time that staff is not conducting preliminary review. So if you look at the statistics reported in the attachments, if you look, for example, at page 6, attachment 1, age of matters in preliminary review, you'll see that we have 21 matters that we have received within the last 3 months awaiting staff's review. We have, again, 21 that we have received between 4 and 6 months, et cetera. So because we have 92 in total, what that means in practice is that many of them sit idle until staff has an opportunity to turn from older matters sequentially to those that we have received more recently. You see twice as many matters awaiting preliminary review in that period, 7 to 9 months. Mm-hmm. And you'll note that within that window, we approached the June election, and we saw an uptick in the number of complaints that staff received at that time, and that's to be expected because the public, right, the election, the public, opposition candidates, campaign consultants, all of those interested persons take a heightened interest in the activities of those who would participate in our electoral system. And you'll note in the second graph there that fully 50% of the matters still awaiting staff's preliminary review are in the campaign finance context. So that would be the first answer to your question. As to what distinguishes between what might take an hour versus what might take a week, staff can dispose of many matters quite readily if the complainant has not alleged facts within our jurisdiction. Those are usually pretty easy to identify, and we get quite a few of those complaints. There's some confusion on the part of the public or on the part of city employees about what precisely the Ethics Commission does. Other times, staff can dispose of a complaint within an hour if, for example, although the allegations might be within our jurisdiction, it's clear that they express opinions and that there is nothing that would make those allegations plausible or colorable. There's nothing no additional indicia to substantiate them. When staff might spend an entire week on preliminary review, it's because there are some indicia of plausibility, but staff has to do additional work to ensure that the complaint is colorable. But beyond that, as I mentioned, when investigators write a preliminary review report, it's going to go eventually through me. I'm going to have to review it, and if they have proposed to dismiss a matter, in addition to my review, the executive director will also have to review it. So there is something of a bottleneck that owes not to the investigators, but to us.
Thank you.
Turning back to the first page, we do have this month more matters open under investigation than we had previously, and substantially more than we had at this time a year ago. But once again, the average amount of time that it takes us to get through those matters is holding about even. The next item in this report refers to the amendments to the whistleblower protection ordinance that Mr. Ford mentioned during his report and that Mr. Bush remarked upon in public comment a minute ago. I have provided a summary of what those changes include. I will not repeat them here because you yourselves passed that ordinance, so you'll have some recollection of what they were. But I will note from page 3 that a couple of those amendments in particular we anticipate may affect the workload of the Enforcement Division. One, as you know, is that the amendments expand the protections of the ordinance to city contractors and employees of city contractors. So effectively that expands the class of those who might complain to the Ethics Commission. And assuming that city contractors or city employees believe that they face retaliation, we can anticipate possibly receiving more complaints than we have previously. The other is that the amendments to the Whistleblower Protection Ordinance clarify what qualifies as protected activity and expands the scope of what qualifies as protected activity. So staff, in reviewing complaints alleging retaliation, frequently dismiss them on the basis that there is a significant jurisdictional defect. And often that defect is that at the outset, a complainant cannot prove or show that they had engaged in protected activity, which is an element of proving a claim of retaliation. That is not something that would change by virtue of investigation. So we dismiss a number of these complaints at the outset. The changes to the ordinance may cure that jurisdictional defect, and the result could be that staff investigate as opposed to dismiss more retaliation complaints than previously. And then finally, you'll remember that the changes to that legislation impose some mandatory training and publication obligations. So the Ethics Commission will work with our counterparts in the Controller's Office and in the Department of Human Resources to produce those materials and ensure that supervisors understand new obligations imposed upon them and that employees and city contractors understand new protections that they enjoy as a result of that. Finally, before I take questions, if there are any additional, I just wanted to note a couple of things on this month's report regarding the efforts of the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue to collect penalties owed to the Commission. We have sometimes received questions from the commissioners in the past, and you'll recall that the Deputy Director of that department did address you at one point some months ago. The couple of cases first listed there, Chris Jackson, and then the committee to elect Norman for supervisor, you'll see that BDR has been working diligently to locate those individuals, and those individuals have very cleverly evaded BDR's process servers to date. Anecdotally, I can tell you that BDR sent a process server to Jacqueline Norman's house. This is out of state. And spoke apparently to one of her children there, and the individual told the process server that Ms. Norman was not home. And so the process server returned a week later only to discover that they had vacated the premises entirely. And the same is true, although less dramatically in the case of Chris Jackson. He has apparently vacated a property that he still owns. And so BDR has had trouble tracking these folks down. So they have indicated that they are now employing what they call skip tracing, which is a fancy way of saying they continue to try to locate both the individual and the individual's assets. So I'm happy to answer questions about that or about any of the other matters reported on here.
Questions? Okay. Public comment on agenda item number 7?
Larry Bush, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'd like to recommend that the Commission consider directing that the policy that was adopted for the Federal Freedom of Information Act be adopted in the handling of complaints here, which is that if an issue is decided that is not within the jurisdiction of a particular agency, that the person who files the complaint is informed what other agencies might be relevant where you could make a file. When I worked at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, there might be an issue that would come up that had to do with the police department. And so we would tell them that's not an issue that we have in HUD, but you might file the report at the police department. The same way, if you have issues that have, complaints that have been filed with ethics, but do not fall within the jurisdiction of ethics, but do fall within other city agencies, the people who are told that we're rejecting your complaint or we're not going to act on it, be told where they can take it from there. Because the point of all of this is to ensure that government operates properly. Thank you.
If I might respond to that, I appreciate the suggestion from Mr. Bush. As a matter of practice, staff do that. When we receive phone calls from prospective complainants, investigators or I will always discuss with them the nature of their allegations and develop an understanding about whether we believe those allegations fall within our jurisdiction. If they do not, staff do diligently work with the caller to identify which agency might be the right place. In some instances, it's impossible for staff to know because we don't fully comprehend the jurisdiction of every agency within the city and county or beyond that to the state and federal level. As to written complaints for which we conduct a formal preliminary review, if we can successfully identify the agency that we believe may have jurisdiction, typically as a matter of courtesy, we will not advise the complainant where to refile only. We will also make a referral to that agency, and we will, on the complainant's behalf, send that complaint over to the agency that we think it belongs to.
Great, thank you.
All right. Mr. Marsteller.
Yes, for the record, Marsteller again. Did have a question regarding Ms. Sweet's case, which looks hopeless since she filed for bankruptcy. But I'm one to learn from mistakes, and I'm wondering if, given the fact that Ms. Pelosi is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, if the commission were to send her a letter suggesting that in the bankruptcy court system, it seems that public financing funds should be a protected class so that we would have a right in the final settlements of whatever bankruptcy proceeding she's in for a share of our funds. It's possible that that we could, in fact, recover those public funds. That case was quite egregious. Most of you missed it. But there were many cases where this person with a ATM card, I'm assuming it was Ms. Sweet or her treasurer, would go to the ATM and withdraw $40. And that was done 100 times. So it was clear they were using public funds as a cash cow. And now it's essentially, we have no rights in bankruptcy court. And it seems like if we appropriately notified Ms. Pelosi of that, she might sponsor a bankruptcy amendment, a bankruptcy code amendment that might be of use to us in the future, and certainly other advocates of public financing in the United States, to protect the abuse of public funds. We have seen a number of examples where there's a lot of shenanigans when it comes to people's, when we have to do skip tracing or whatever. And I want to protect our public financing system to the fullest extent possible. And I'm sure that with Ms. Pelosi as our representative, that she would be willing to help.
A question, Madam Chairwoman.
Yes.
Mr. Marsteller, do you know if there's legislation pending in this Congress to amend the bankruptcy?
No, the bankruptcy code I don't know of, but I know that
All right, so you don't know, so it would be new legislation.
Yeah, probably new legislation. Nothing in this area, I'm sure, but it would have to be checked on.
Well, I think it ought to be investigated as a possibility.
Yeah, it sounds viable to me.
I think staff ought to promulgate a draft of a analysis and cover letter to be sent by the commission.
We wouldn't necessarily have to detail what we know of Ms. Sweet, but...
Well, it isn't the Sweet case.
It's not.
The general policy.
Right.
Ought to be a law.
And I think...
prevent that from being discharged in bankruptcy.
The first bill, H.R. 1, is in fact advocating the establishment of a public financing system for the U.S. Congress.
Well,
and that was done by Paul Sarbanes' son, who's a representative now in
But the Bankruptcy Act is in a different code.
That's
different part of the United States Code.
But there is...
And my recollection is taxes aren't exempt, can't be discharged.
Correct.
That's right. Certain classes cannot be.
Yeah, those are taxpayer due monies. Madam Chair, can we ask staff to do that and present it to us next month?
So just to be clear, the request would be to have staff prepare a draft communication, draft letter to Speaker Pelosi outlining the concerns that we have regarding the misuse of public funds and the risk that the city and other that cities and other government entities face when they're recipients of those public funds have misused them and are in bankruptcy, and that there is no recourse for recovery of those funds.
Yeah, with a short analysis of our experience in at least one case, and maybe there are others in the past years.
Mr. Pierce, did you have a comment?
Potentially not. I mean, the Enforcement Division is not accustomed to drafting and sponsoring or proposing the sponsorship of legislation at the federal level. We could certainly work with the Policy Division, but that would disrupt the priorities that the Commission has already set for the Policy Division. We could in turn work with BDR.
Here's what I'll do, Madam Chair. I'll draft the letter, and I'll give it to the Executive Director, and she can then edit it as she sees fit and then
can-
transmit it to you.
Okay. That would be a good solution. Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment? All right. Moving on to agenda item number 8, discussion of Executive Director's Report, an update of various programmatic and operational highlights of Ethics Commission staff activities since the Commission's last monthly meeting.
Thank you, Chair Chu. The report is fairly brief this month. We have continued to make progress on our hiring. We've moved into the oral interview phase of our civil service examinations, and I'm hopeful that we'll have more specific news to report, not an update, but news to report next month at your meeting. Separately, as you can see, the budget, it's budget season, and all departments will be submitting their budgets to the mayor's office on February 21st. All departments received instructions from the mayor's office to provide, as a part of those packages, a 2% cut in FY20 and a 4% cut for FY21. We did receive those what those targeted amounts would translate to for our operations, roughly $84,000 in year 1 and $167,000 in year 2. There was also a request for to prepare a contingency plan of additional cuts of approximately 2% and 1% in the, a 1% cut in FY20 and a 2% cut. We recognize that departments are being asked to prepare these exercises for the mayor's office. We look forward to bringing more detailed information to you next month as we prepare our submission. Obviously, cuts like this would translate to positions being lost, and that also is something we're hearing from the mayor's office, that they are not interested in layoffs. So we're in the process over the next few weeks of finalizing and focusing our budget request, and we'll bring that for your information further at the February meeting.
Commissioner.
Ms. Pelham, as you'll recall, Mayor Lee gave those directions similar, and I think at that time the commission instructed you, in effect, to not comply with them and to point out the need to keep our funding at the level it's at. And so that I think certainly from my point of view, I would urge you to take a fairly hard line on it and pointing out the fact that the Ethics Commission only now is getting up to where it can operate as efficiently as it should.
Thank you.
Yes, I would echo what Commissioner Rennie has said, that certainly under the former mayor, he was very supportive of the work that the commission is doing, and I hope that Mayor Breed will continue, not just in word but in deed, in terms of not cutting the budget. And as you note, in order to meet these budget cuts, it would mean eliminating staff. And so essentially we would not be able to hire the many positions that are currently open at this point. And I think that that would severely and materially impair the Commission's ability to be effective and to implement a host of regulations and laws that were just passed. So anything that I can do to help communicate that message, like that budget cuts are, I understand that there are challenges, from a financial standpoint, but that across the board cuts in this fashion would not help the Commission or the city achieve its goals. So look forward to hearing more, and I hope that the salary savings that we have through the open positions can help us, in some way, and that they don't come back for a full run rate problem, in FY20. Okay, public comment?
I had a couple of technical questions, not too technical. When we lapse a position, now with the staff relatively large enough, there may be, in fact, some margins that are significant enough for under normal osmosis on salary savings or turnover in staff. We certainly don't want to encourage that, but I'm just wondering if that's a practical way to view this, that we might have some latitude. That you don't have to answer now. It's just a concept in my mind that we may have a significant size staff enough now where we could see those numbers accrue to our advantage. The other question I had is, when does the budget analyst for the board come into the process as opposed to your introduction to the mayor's budget analysts? Do they work together in any way, or are they completely compartmentalized? That's another question. I don't know how that really works in reality.
They are separate.
Okay.
Mayor has a budget analyst, the board has a budget analyst.
Generally, when it's gotten to the board, we would lobby the budget analysts, or at least Common Cause would lobby the budget analysts, and we have a number of contacts there, or at least I do as a result of that process. So if you need any help at the board, I couldn't answer. I don't think I know the mayor's budget analyst for this. Is that a new person, do you know? You were introduced?
I don't.
Yes, I believe it's a newly assigned.
New assigned. Okay, very good. That's all.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Question of Executive Director. We have 5 vacancies now then. And all the investigator, all 4 are working.
No.
Thank you.
We have, just to clarify, we have 3 investigators currently staffed, 3? 3, right? We are short 1 until we complete our hiring process. We have 3 investigator positions filled in addition to the enforcement director. We have 1 vacancy, which we are working to complete the hiring process for at this point.
All right, so we do have 1 vacancy.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action regarding status of complaints received or initiated by the Ethics Commission. Is there a desire to go into closed session? It's 4 o'clock.
In light of the hour, I won't request a closed session, but I have about 30 questions on the report, and I will rely on the executive director and other staff to provide information.
Okay. Any public comment on this item? Comment? Okay. Agenda item number 10, discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. One from the commission. Public comment? None. Additional opportunity for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to Ethics Commission Bylaws, Article 7, Section 2. No comment? Okay. A motion to adjourn?
Motion so moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.